Welcome to Linn Valley Radio. I'm your host. My name is Colin Vaughn, and this show is called Freedom of Information. And tonight we're going to cover basically how to deal with the police. You can encounter them in a multiple of ways, and you should know your rights. And in my opinion, and I think the police think that you should know your rights too. They don't feel sorry for you at all if they get you to fall for engaging in conversation and you say some stuff that might incriminate yourself, or you allow them to search something and maybe something wasn't there before, or it could have been a car that you had bought and you didn't know there was something in there. Who knows? Anyways, it's a good habit to just know your rights as to what they can do and what you can do at all times. So, let's just jump right into it. So, the base of this show tonight is going to be knowing your rights and knowing how to deal with cops and do it the right way. So, if the police actually stop you and they ask, you to do anything like, hey, I need to talk to you, or hey, probably the biggest thing is they always go, give me your ID. I got to run your ID. And they're going to tell you the story of, well, anytime I encounter anybody, I got to do a report and you got to have an ID. Well, the only time you actually have to give the ID is if they suspect you of a crime. So you don't have to give the ID. You can reject his reference to wanting your ID. And you'll want to ask him, are you being detained? And he's going to have to answer yes or no. And if he says yes, obviously you need to know why. And if he says no, then you need to say, am I free to go? Because the only reason they can try to detain you, they have to have a reason or a suspicion that you've committed a crime. So it's important that you ask that question. Are you being detained? You need to ask that. And then, if he does telling you that yes, he is, you need to ask, why are you detaining me? And you need a valid reason. It needs to be a reasonable suspicion, or that you've been involved in a specific crime. It can't be like a stereotype or a guess. It just can't happen. But they're almost always going to ask you for an ID, and you need to make sure before you give your ID that you ask if you're being detained and what reasonable crime is he suspecting that you've committed, and you want more information. So that's how you need to handle that. If they try to search your car, your house, or your clothing, you need to say repeatedly that you do not consent to the search. It's important you say that. Do not consent to the search. So you don't ever want to consent to anything. You don't want to consent to a conversation. You don't want to consent to a search of your persons, of your vehicle. You're just looking for trouble if you do that. Any lawyer is going to tell you exactly what I'm telling you. Do not consent. Do not have a conversation. Do not answer questions. Anytime they ask you a question, just tell them you don't answer questions. You've been advised by your attorney not to, engage in conversation with any law enforcement, and they got to leave you alone. Not saying he's going to leave you alone, though. So if he keeps pushing, don't feel like, you've got to do anything. And technically, you only have to roll down your window enough that you guys can hear each other, primarily for you hearing him. So if he says, hey, you need to roll your window down more, you can say, I hear you just fine, officer. And then he's going to try to make it look like he's going to break your window out. And he's going to say, roll your window down. And you can simply tell him again, I can hear you just fine, officer. That's your private domain is your car. He is not the boss of you. Okay? It's important you know that. So as long as you handle it the right way, you're going to be fine. If for any reason that they get you out of your vehicle or your home, you can go ahead and get out of the vehicle, but you want to make sure that you lock the door, okay? And then you want to ask, if they're at your house, you need to see the warrant. You need to check for the proper address, judge's signature, and what the warrant says that the cops are searching for. Everything has got to be correct for it to be a legal warrant. Otherwise, tell the cops that they don't have your consent. And I'd say a lot more than half, most of the time, because you don't know the law, to your ignorance, and I don't say that offensively, most people don't know how it all works. But to them, they think that you should know, and they've got no problems taking advantage of you. So I'm trying to help you out as best I can so you understand really how the ropes work in basic situations that you're going to encounter a police officer. So again, I'll recap that. If they're trying to search anything, if they don't have a warrant, you don't consent to the search, period. And then if they do have a warrant, you want to make sure all the T's are crossed and all the I's are dotted correctly. So it's really important that you pay attention to that. But I would say most of probably who I'm talking to, you're going to run into either a cop approaching you in person or in a vehicle for basic information. And you want to make sure that if you are being arrested, that you physically do not resist. You want to keep your cool and don't say a word. Say nothing. Just go ahead and take the handcuffs and go in the back of the car. Do not communicate with the officer at all. There's a little saying, anything that you say can and will be used against you in the court of law. If you're just asking questions like why am I being detained, those are all basic essential questions to the contractual engagement that you're having with the officer. But don't answer any questions at all, regardless of whatever the situation is. And I'll let you in on a secret, if you will, for those that want to know, can you drive a car without a driver's license? No, you can't. But you can travel in a car. Travel is a God-given right. You can travel by horse, by bicycle, by scooter, go-kart, moped. Travel is a God-given right. Driving is a privilege that's done by government. So there's two different meanings. Some people don't understand the two. Driving is a privilege. Traveling is not. You can travel, and there is no speed limit to travel. If you've ever seen a traveling speed limit sign, let me know what it is. So anybody that's in a situation where maybe they can't get a driver's license, you do not have to have one. You can travel. You can drive or you can travel in a vehicle without a license plate as well. It has to be marked as a private vehicle with appropriate paperwork. For anybody that's maybe in a bad situation, look into that. Look into what I'm talking about. Traveling in a vehicle versus driving a vehicle, because they're acknowledged in two different ways. An officer will never say anything to you about traveling. He'll always reference the word driving, and they have certain terms that they use. Subject. They reference people as subjects. So, but anyways, as we move along here, if they arrest you, you don't want to talk until you've got a lawyer present. And you want to refuse to talk at all costs. Don't say anything until your lawyer arrives. Don't talk to any other inmates. If you get arrested, don't talk to anybody in there about anything. Nothing. Absolutely nothing, folks. You don't want to say anything at all. If for some reason you're on parole or probation, tell your probation officer you've been arrested, but nothing else about the incident. Absolutely nothing. And you'll notice the moral of the story here, folks, is your mouth will get you in trouble. So just don't talk to them. No conversation needs to be had. Nothing's good's going to come out of anything. I'll give you an example. If you were at your buddy's house, and most people don't know this, and let's say you had a beer, and you get pulled over, and he's like, "Hey, you know why I stopped you tonight?" And you're like, "No." And he's like, "Oh, one of your headlights is out." And you're like, "Oh, I didn't know." And it's cool. It's cool conversation right now. Yeah. You probably want to get that fixed. You know, where you coming from tonight? He's making it almost like he's your friend. Oh, I was at a buddy's house. Oh, okay. You didn't have anything to drink, did you? And then all of a sudden you had a beer. You pause or whatever it might be, and then and so you folks know, if you admit that you've had any alcohol at all, you're doing a sobriety checkpoint. If you admit that you've had anything, if you said you took just a sip of beer, you're going to have a sobriety checkpoint there. If you admit that you've had anything to that officer, you're going to have a sobriety checkpoint. That's just protocol. They have to do it. So, again, if you didn't answer any of those questions like what I was telling you, if you just say, "Hey, I'll answer questions," and you keep your window rolled up, and you make it real clear that you know the law and that your lawyers advise you not to have conversation, then you would have never gotten, in trouble. Think about the trouble that could save you if you know how to handle yourself with a police officer. So, really, if you can just think in your mind, and I know everything I said, that's maybe a lot to remember, just don't talk to them. So when they ask questions, just say, "Hey, I don't answer questions. My lawyers advise me not to answer any questions to law enforcement." And if he keeps pressing, just say, "I don't answer questions. What do you not understand about that?" I don't answer questions. It's that simple. Don't ever answer their questions. Don't be their friend. They're not here to be your friend. They start off that way, and then they go, "Oh, well, you told me you had a beer, or you told me this, or you told me that." Don't talk. It's that simple. You can't incriminate yourself if you don't talk. And if the only thing that comes out of your mouth is, "I don't answer questions, my lawyers advise me," what does he have to go off of? When the court comes down, if it does, which it probably won't if you do what I'm telling you, and if it does, they got nothing. That's the important part. They've got nothing. Shut them down. They're taking advantage of your ignorance. So anyways, that's what I got for this first half of Freedom of Information. My name is Colin Vaughn. Thanks for tuning in to Linn Valley Radio, and we'll be back with part 2 here. Stay tuned.